You're listening to Awards Magnet, a Gold Derby podcast hosted by Joy Singh and Christopher Rosen. Welcome back to Awards Magnet. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm joined by Joy Singh. And Joyce, we're back with another interview episode. It's twice in 1 week.
Very exciting, and even more exciting for me because I'm not part of this one.
No, I did this one by myself, which I gotta say wasn't as fun for me. I like it when we're together.
Wow.
It's great when we're together.
It was a scheduling conflict. So.
It was a scheduling conflict, and it was a Friday night, and it was with Kris Sanders and Kris Bowers, and me, Kris Rosen. So it's a very annoying conversation because the whole time I'm like, Kris Bowers, Kris Sanders.
Did you do like Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3?
No, I should have done that. That's why I need you there, because I didn't even think of this. I didn't even think of Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3. That sucks. But Kris Sanders directed The Wild Robot, which I did a great job. Listeners will know we call it One Wild Robot. But rather than try to explain that to him in a 20-minute interview with Kris Bowers, I was like, I'm just going to call it The Wild Robot or Wild Robot. So there's no Wild Robot reference.
I was going to ask if you told him what your daughter calls it.
No, I didn't tell him that, no. Because it just didn't seem like the vibe was great. He was incredibly kind, Kris Sanders. And Kris Bowers was wonderful, too. An Oscar winner, Kris Bowers, also now a first-time composer nominee. He was nominated in the short categories twice, where he won. But no, it's not. We don't call it One Wild Robot. But no, when you're listening back to this, no, in my head, every single time, it was One Wild Robot. One Wild Robot, One Wild Robot.
Is it too late to dub you saying one over the every time? That might be too much work
That might be too much. That might be too much. Yeah. But so we're not doing that. But it's a fun conversation. Great movie, Wild Robot, One Wild Robot. A 3-time Oscar nominee, Joyce. Sound, score, and animated feature. It's at the top of my ballot. I know. I loved it. So
your fake ballot. The sound nomination, just great stuff.
Chef's kiss. So listen to Kris Sanders and Kris Bowers and me, Chris Rosen. Too many Chris's.
Peter 3.
I'll be Peter 3.
Yeah.
And we'll be back later to wrap it up after you listen. I'm so pleased to be here with Kris Sanders and Kris Bowers. And I'm Chris Rosen. So like we were just saying, a Kris party, a triple Kris. But I just want to start your both of your Oscar nominees. Kris Sanders, this is your 4th nomination in the animated feature category, and Kris Bowers, you're an Oscar winner, and it's your first nomination though as a composer, because you won obviously in the short film categories and were another nominee. So I guess just first of all, congratulations on these incredible nominations. I guess for Kris Sanders, and to start, like what was like when you found out you were nominated for this film, and especially having it be this film, what was that like for you, and like how'd it feel, I guess?
For me, Kris?
Yes, for you, Kris Sanders.
It was absolutely thrilling because one of the things that I've been, just talking about lately is just, it came to mind that the visual departure that we made and narrative departure that we made, it was pretty risky. Like, it's the kind of thing a studio might only risk on a short, but DreamWorks was willing to, trust us to do it on the scale of a feature. So to have it received well by an audience, and then to have it received well by the Oscars and by the Academy, I should say, was really fantastic and thrilling.
And Kris, for you, obviously, like I said, you're an Oscar winner, which is amazing. Congratulations. But obviously, you're also an incredible composer to be nominated now for first time as a composer in that best score category. I guess, like, how gratifying was that? Like, how did that feel to find out that you were actually nominated?
Yeah, I mean, it felt pretty amazing. Very surreal. I think that for me, this category means so much because it's the category that introduced me to the craft of film scoring. Like I used to look at this list of composers and this list of scores, and I would buy those scores to study them. And so to be on that list, I think is really amazing. And then also to be nominated by my branch, for the nominations to come from our branches, and for this group of people that largely are composers that I've looked up to, that I've followed and studied. For that group of people to feel like the work that I did was worthy of that recognition, I think means a great deal.
So Kris Sanders, obviously you have, like we've talked, you and I spoke earlier, but I know just in general, you're obviously like a legend in the animation field. You've worked on so many incredible films, and even before you were director working with Disney and like the classic Disney animated movies, all those movies have incredible music and score. And I think like that I guess so for you, when you're looking to find a composer for Wild Robot and give it that classic sound, maybe, or even something new that is unexpected, like, and obviously music is such a huge part of the film. I think you could basically have, this is a great film with incredible dialogue, but you could have no dialogue. And I think with Kris Bowers' score, it would be an incredible story as well. So I guess like when you were looking for a composer to pull this off, what stood out for you about Kris, and like why was he your choice for a composer to do this music?
I have to credit Mike Knobloch and the Universal group for introducing me to I'd heard Kris's music before, but they were the ones that said, you know what, the perfect pairing of this type of movie, which again was a very big departure, really different narratively and tonally, was Kris Bowers. A lot of times you've listened to somebody's music and you didn't necessarily know you had, and that was the case with Kris. But I went out and got as many of Kris's things as I could, and I immediately agreed with Mike and Natalie, and it was the perfect fit, because there's a first of all, it's a huge job. I can't overstate how large a premium I put on music. I've always said, whatever the budget is for any movie I work on, saw off enough to buy the best score possible, and I will make the film for whatever is left over, because I really do feel like it's 50% of what we do, and surely it is one of the biggest voices in the entire film. I build places in the film where the characters stop talking, and it's handed completely to the score. So again, it's a huge job as well as an incredibly intricate and crucial job. And this is where I should have thought through this better before I get on here. But there was just something about, and maybe this is okay, and this is what it is like in the scoring sessions, because I'm like, I do not know how to say these things. I do not have the right music words. I will say this and make Kris figure it out. But just there's something about this. There's strength in the gentleness of Kris's music. There's a confidence and an earnestness and an honesty and a sincerity to it, a deep sincerity. And that's how I felt about the film and the story. So I'd say it's that deep sincerity in Kris's music that I think he can't help but do that. And that's what I was responding to. It was fresh as well. So all those things.
Kris, I think that's Kris Sanders. I think that's exactly right. And when I listen to Kris Bowers, your music, I just think it's like, it would be so easy to imagine this being like treacle or, you know what I mean? Like the way your music is so earnest, it is earnest, but it like is very honest, I guess I would say. Even though I used to play music, I don't have like a lot of the language to just talk about this, but I do think there's something special about your music and the way you're able to generate so much emotion from the audience. I mean, like I've watched this movie and it's like weeping because of your music. I just think it is so great, and the images and the message of the film, all this stuff put together. I guess for you, when you kind of came into approach the score for this movie, what immediately stood out to you, or like what were you like what was your how did you kind of like find the entry point into this?
Yeah, well, I think the first conversations Kris Sanders and I had were about that role that music was going to play, and I think I was so excited by that because going back to the music for film that I fell in love with, it was crafted by these composers that were integral to the storytelling, and that they were very clear in understanding how they could build themes and melodies that grew over the course of a film along with the story, in a way where when the most climactic, most emotionally resonant moment in that movie happens, the perfect piece of music plays there, and we feel this unexplainable feeling, largely because somebody was mindful of how that was crafted. And I think that it's the same as like when a director works with a cinematographer and there's language around what lenses do we use, how do we light things to make it look a certain way. Like my favorite composers know their craft in that way, and so it's amazing to work with a director like Kris Sanders who wants to embrace music in that way, where we were talking about how music can evolve over the course of a film to make us feel something cumulatively. And as far as the way that I got into it for this project, it was largely just my own personal response to how the movie made me feel. Like the only reason why I'm a musician in the first place is because I wasn't really allowed to have emotions as a kid. Essentially, like, I think whether it was like at home, I love my parents, whether it was at home or like at school, like there's these environments where like as a boy, as a black boy, like it's just like you like keep your emotions to yourself. We don't want to feel those things or see those things. But I had them. And so piano was the only way I could express those things. And it honestly became like a clearer way for me to express that than words. And so for me, my music that I'm writing for this is me also being this audience to this powerful story, to these powerful ideas, to these moving characters. And then I'm filled with all this emotion. And then I go to the piano and I improvise and try to find something that makes me feel all those feelings. And so when I watched the film for the first time, a number of times, I'm first doing that, thematic approach where I'm like taking notes on each scene, like what character's perspective are we looking from? Like, how do I know which theme to have so I can have an idea of like how many themes do we need to have? Like who has a theme and like what has a theme? And that's when I approach Chris with the idea of like there being a theme for this idea of family, because there are these moments like the migration or like the ending that it's not really Roz's moment, it's not really Bright Bill's moment, it's both of them moving through this thing. And then I find these moments like the migration sequence where my emotions are so triggered that I then go to the piano trying to express those emotions that are coming up for me. I think a lot of that had to do with me becoming a parent just before working on this and thinking about, with Chris's guidance, like the complexities of what they're dealing with at this time. And all of those feelings are just kind of coming out in this honest way that I think, fortunately and luckily has that impact on people watching it, probably because it's me just trying to make myself feel yeah.
Chris Sanders, that's another. I think the theme, like Kris Bowers is saying there, the theme of the movie is, I think, really people really did respond to that, and I'm a parent too, so I was like, I think I really latched onto that, and I just think like even if you're not, I think you would understand, like you could think of that as you being like think back to your own parents, right? I mean, everybody, like what I mean, like I do think there is some universality to the story. That said, I do think it does really impact parents incredibly well. I guess was that like, for you, did you notice like? Was that something that stood out immediately, I guess, for you too in the story?
It did. A story that is where a mother is the character that is front and center. She is the hub of the story wheel. Everything revolves around Roz and this role of being a mother. That's unusual. Like, moms are noticeably missing from animated films. It's kind of a joke, in our circles. But to have a mom as the core was again, it was like not just unusual, but it was, for me, it was unexplored territory. I've always felt like the word relatable is somewhat overused. I think that a film doesn't have to be relatable for you to love this film, or the word compelling, I think, is the more important word. I certainly am compelled and love films that I don't relate to. And sometimes I seek out films purposely because like those characters are not anything like me. Their situation is not anything like me. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to have. And the weird and strange thing about this film was how incredibly relatable it was. I don't think anybody who watches this isn't going to have some direct view into it. Either you're a parent or you're on the verge of being a parent. You had a parent. You had a great relationship. You had a more challenging relationship. All these things are happening inside this film, which is one of the things I loved about it and didn't even know at first. As I worked on the narrative, the script, and the story, things developed and revealed themselves. And I would realize, oh my gosh, here's an opportunity to point something out. Here's an opportunity to illuminate something that I didn't realize at the very beginning. So it became surprisingly complex. And that's the weird, interesting thing about this book that Peter Brown created, is that you read it as a kid at a certain grade level, and you're going to see and hear certain things. But I think that's one of the reasons the book has become so popular, is that you can read it at any age and you will see and hear different things inside it. And when you work on an animated feature, you're not excluding anyone. You want it to resonate with everyone. And it's okay that sometimes a kid might not get something. A joke may go over their head. That's okay. And it's okay that you have things, just for kids that a parent will enjoy, but they're going to enjoy more. So you want it operating at the full spectrum. And again, the story was unusual in how rich it was in all those wonderful hidden things.
But the other thing, hearing you talk about it, the other thing about, again, like focusing on a mother character is you showing like that it's not always the greatest thing, right? Like I think that's another really cool thing about the movie, where she's like not ambiguous about it, but like not, like this sucks sometimes, right? Like, and I do think that it's like not something you always see even in any movie, let alone animated. So to have that in this movie, I really felt like not subversive, maybe I would call it, but like it is really interesting and kind of a cool thing to show for parents and also for the kids, right? Because like kids, I think, understand that it's sometimes a tough the parents are in a tough spot sometimes, right? So I do think that's like really really funny to hear, like talk about that. For Kris Bowers, you mentioned like kind of watching the movie over again when you're watching it, I guess, is like does the voice performances help you in any way? Like, this is a movie with like these incredibly rich performances. Lupita Nyong'o's performance, I think, is like fantastic, and like I know that it's a fraud, they're not going to give Oscar nominations to voice performances and whatever, but I'm like, man, she absolutely sold this arc, and like I just think it's an incredible performance, and I don't think the movie would be great anyway, like I said, even without the dialogue or anything, but I think she really elevates it even beyond even greater, right? Like that kind of thing. I guess does the performance and stuff like that, does that inspire you too, or help you kind of like figure out the themes, like you were saying, like how you want the family theme to sound, or if the characters are going to have individual sounds, I guess?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that like you said, the art of voiceover work, especially with actors like Lupita or Pedro or Kit, I feel like they are taking it just as seriously as anything else in terms of like the level of nuance to give to their voice. I remember hearing Lupita talk about how, even though her person is not being shown, she's then paying even more attention to how much she can deliver with her voice and like registers and things like that. For me, I'm an accompanist ultimately, like as the composer. Even when there's no dialogue, I'm accompanying the story, and so like I think about that going back to my roots as a jazz pianist, where there are so many times where I was playing something and working on a sequence, and maybe before Lupita spoke, or when they were still figuring out how they wanted to approach Roz's voice, and then hearing it later and deciding, oh, this definitely has to be in this key because I need to be in this register versus where she's speaking. And then that arc that she provided also helped me in terms of knowing how to approach that musically, because there's so many things in the score that are subtly adjusting where we're going from things that feel more synthetic for Roz to with her theme to things that feel more organic. There's moments where like choir is only used in moments where she's like showing these human instincts. And so I can use the way that Lupita is approaching that voice performance as a guide. And then I'd say Pedro's performance for Fink was actually hugely pivotal for me, because I remember looking at the first pass of it and thinking of approaching Fink in a specific way musically. And Pedro's voice has like a softness to it, or something about it that, like, even though the character is like in the beginning trying to con Roz and is like kind of this like slippery sly character, like there's this like almost sweetness about the way that he sounds that, Pedro also often says that like he's been playing all these like masculine, like tough characters with like the Mandalorian, all these things, and like this movie Kris really embraced who Pedro actually is as a human in a way that he was able to put into this character. And I think I was going to approach Fink with so much more of is he like a bad guy kind of way, that Pedro's performance actually made me approach it in this like more lighthearted, fun, honest way. Even though in the beginning it has this kind of almost like this sly quality to it, this jazzy kind of quality to it. Over the course of it, it definitely evolves as well as Fink's character evolves. And then just instrumentation wise, it was largely informed by how he sounded. So yeah, 100%. It was really amazing to see how much, as I got more and more of their recordings into my cut, the more it just made it very clear for me how to approach it musically.
Yeah. Kris, you want to say something? Because we do have to wrap up. But if you had one, Kris Sanders, if you were going to say anything about what Kris was saying, otherwise we do have to wrap up. But
I think I always learn something as I do these interviews. And I would have to say I would second that like the freshness of the angle that Kris hit Fink, even from his first appearance, because that's where he's going to be at his most like foxy, duplicitous. He's stealing the egg,
Right.
and because of course the whole story is that the programming of the creatures on the island is going to eventually change because of Roz, and he is a self-serving by requisite self-serving character. So it has this really cool sort of it's like this kind of James Bond villain thing going on. So it's not just business as usual as far as like it's just action. It has flavor, and it's like it feels like it's bright orange. If that music was color, it'd be this bright orange, just like Think is. And from the very first, I think, time that Kris played that, I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! I was so excited because it just felt like we just got so much more than we even we could have got by with less, but we got all this flavor that was so perfect for him.
It's an incredible movie. I feel like we could talk about this for much, much longer, but we do have to wrap up. Kris Sanders and Kris Bowers, Oscar nominees from The Wild Robot, which had 3 nominations, including a Best Sound nomination. Just an incredible film, and really great to see it so widely embraced by the Academy. I think that's really, as a fan of the movie, it was really heartening to see all of you guys get nominated for this. So congratulations on those nominations. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Joyce, wow, what a great interview with Kris Sanders and Kris Bowers, right? You were so great. Oh, wait, no, it was just me, like a schmuck. But
I was Peter 4.
You were Peter 4. You were there in spirit, Joyce.
Yeah.
Wild Robot, great. You can stream it on Peacock, Joyce. Did you know that?
1 Peacock for 1 Wild Robot.
We'll be back later this week with more great stuff. Email us at slugfest@goldderby.com. And if you're, and we'll be back then. We'll talk to you later, Joyce. Bye. Thanks for listening to Awards Magnet. The show is produced by Aaron Greenwald. Our logo is designed by Chelsea Sikora. To be part of the show, email us at slugfests@goldderby.com and follow us on social media @goldderby.